Hey everybody, and welcome back. After doing a quick little poll on my channel, I saw that a lot of you were pretty interested in me covering openings as well, so here we are. In today's video, we're going to talk about what I think is the easiest opening that you can learn as a beginner playing white, and that's the Italian game. Now the reason is, all the white moves in the Italian game are fairly natural and easy to follow. So, let's get started. The game here starts with e4. And black is going to respond with e5. Knight to f3 attacks the pawn, and now black is going to defend with knight to c6. Here, the Italian game happens when we play bishop to c4. The reason we place the bishop on that diagonal is because white wants to put pressure on the f7 pawn, and second, we're going to clear the way for our king so that he can castle the next turn. Now, black has two main ways of responding to this, and those are knight to f6 and bishop to c5. If black continues with knight to f6, the main purpose is to attack our e4 pawn. Now if you want your games to be more entertaining and challenging, or if your style is a bit more aggressive, you can respond with knight to g5, double attacking the f7 pawn and going into what's known as the fried liver attack. The main way that black stops this threat is with pawn to d5, blocking that diagonal. White captures, black captures back, and now you might think that your attack is over. You don't have two pieces targeting that pawn, and your knight is also under attack by the queen. But here, instead, you're going to disregard all of that and take the pawn anyway. Because after black captures, you have this beautiful move with queen to f3, checking the white king while also attacking the knight. Black's best move here is actually king to e6, double defending his piece, but he's going to have a pretty hard time defending this. White is going to play knight to c3, putting more and more pressure on the knight, and so on. Now, if you're playing black, and you want to avoid all that, instead of recapturing the pawn, you're going to have to play knight to a5. Now, I know, you've heard a lot of that, a knight on the rim is dim, but, as in life, there are always exceptions to the rule. In this position, you played that move with a good purpose. You're going to kick the bishop off of that dangerous diagonal, and if it moves to b2, you're going to exchange it. Now, maybe white is going to decide to check, but you can easily block it with your bishop, and if he trades his bishop, you take with the queen, and you're ready to castle queenside. You're in a much better position than white, who still has those undeveloped pieces. Alright, so, going back to knight to f6, I do not recommend playing knight to g5, especially if you're a beginner, because you can mess this up very easily, and some moves just aren't so natural. So instead, I would heavily advise you to just play d3. Simple, principled chess. You defend your pawn and create room for your bishop to develop. You'll have much more opportunities to attack once you've castled and your king is safe. So from here, we'll have some normal development and we can transition into the middle game. Now I just want to show you a quick little trap that can happen here. I mean, it's not really a trap because you don't sacrifice anything and the moves are fairly natural, but more often, black will mess this up. Now after you've developed all of your minor pieces, black's most common response is pawn to h6, trying to kick away our bishop and release the pin on his knight. You take, queen takes, and you can play knight to d5, attacking the queen and threatening a fork with knight to c7. The best response here is to bring the queen back, and we play pawn to c3, preparing to push to d4 and open up the center. Now I call this a trap because for it to work, you need your opponent to blunder with bishop to e6, and now no matter what, black is gonna lose material. We push to d4, and if they take, we take back. They think they're safe with a bishop check, believing that they can recapture with their knight. But what they're forgetting is we have this queen check on a4, and if they block with their knight, we can play pawn to d5. Now it's best for black to first take our bishop, and after all the exchanges, we play queen to c2, attacking the bishop. Once it moves, white is up a pawn and has much better control over the center of the board. If they decide to retreat the bishop, you just take it, and once again, pawn to d5 double attacks black's pieces. Alright, so that was one variation with knight to f6. Now, let's take a look at a variation with bishop to c5, which is actually a lot more common in my experience. This is called the Gioco Piano game. From here, the move I recommend is playing pawn to c3. You can also play knight to c3 or castle, but pawn to c3 gives you the best chances of winning. Let's say you end up playing knight to c3. The position becomes very symmetrical. Now, with the move to c3, white has a clear plan in mind. He's preparing d4, which attacks both the bishop and the pawn, opens the center, and gives white many opportunities to continue from there. Black's most common response is going to be knight to e4, attacking your pawn. And this is the only important line you need to remember. Everything else comes pretty naturally. Your initial plan doesn't change. You're still going to play d4, and after the capture and the other capture, bishop to b4, check. The key to remember is that you need to block this check with your bishop, not with your knight. If you block with your knight, black can take your e-pawn, double attacking your pinned knight, and white is going to have a very hard time from that point on. But if you decide to defend with the bishop, first of all, if he exchanges, you take back with the knight, and now both of your pawns are completely protected. You've developed your pieces and are ready to castle on the next turn. If he doesn't trade and goes for the same knight takes pawn, you take the bishop, black recaptures, and here's the critical and brilliant move. Bishop takes on f3. The whole point of having that bishop on that diagonal was to put pressure on that pawn. So, why does this work so well? It's because after the king takes, you have this really nice queen to b3 check. And after he defends with pawn to d5, we take the knight. Even though the engine says that this position is equal, white truly has a much easier game. He can castle, play knight to c3 to challenge black's knight, and there are a lot of other possibilities. Now that was the hardest line of this opening in my opinion, because it has a lot of counterintuitive moves that a beginner wouldn't be so willing to make or see, like giving up the pawns and sacrificing a bishop, but this is all the theory that you might need. If you don't feel comfortable playing this line, you could defend against knight to f6 with pawn to d3 and have a more passive and solid game. Now I think that's all for this video. I think I've covered all the played lines. One thing I don't like so much about covering openings is that there's no real fixed solution, and there are way too many variables to cover in just one video. But if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, and I'm going to answer all of them. Take care, see you next time.